Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another library lunch hour. My name is Aníbal Arocho. I'm the library manager here at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies Library and Archive. I'm joined by my colleague, Lindsay Whitwer, who's our digital archivist. And we have the distinct pleasure of being joined today by Raquel Z. Rivera. And Raquel is an author and singer-songwriter. She has a PhD in sociology. Her areas of scholarly interest include popular music, culture, race, ethnicity, nation, and diaspora, and the intersection between Latino and Africana studies. From 2006 to 2009, she was a researcher at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies here at Hunter College. And Raquel, welcome. Thank you for coming. Today we're exploring hip hop in the archive. So, like when it comes to hip hop in the archive, we can think of no one better.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so happy about this invitation and this opportunity to just highlight what's in the archive. So thank you.
Great. So let's jump on in. What drew you to hip hop and reggaeton as a research focus?
I was in high school when Vico C was doing his underground cassettes and they were running from hand to hand. So I got to listen to that. It wasn't yet on the radio, no rap, no reggae on the radio. In 1988, I graduated from high school. I left for 4 years. And when I came back in 1992, the scene was completely different. There were actually like official recordings by record labels and the presence of what was then known as underground or rap or reggae, not reggaeton, reggae, was really huge. So it was all around me. My friends were into it. I have a sister 5 years younger than I, Annabeli. So I was 20, she was 15. And we were surrounded by this powerful and rich youth-driven culture, but nothing was being done in the media about it. And when something was mentioned, it was disparaging. Ay, esa porquería que hacen estos muchachos, that has nothing to do with Puerto Rican culture. So I had the honor of taking a course with Ángel Quintero Rivera, Chuco Quintero, who is an amazing sociologist. This was when I was doing my master's degree at the Centro de Estudios Avanzados de Puerto Rico y el Caribe in Old San Juan. And in his sociology of music class, I proposed a final project based on underground. And I was afraid that he would say no, but he's brilliant and he knew that it was an important topic. So that was the start, the project that I did for him. And then the other side was this, there was this humorist, I don't know if that's a word, in Claridad newspaper that was always poking fun at the rapero look and the rapero culture. And one day I got so mad that I wrote a letter to the editor, that then I was surprised that the editor of Claridad called me back. And I can't remember if it was Alida Millán or if it was Rafa Acevedo, who called and said, would you want to publish this as an article? And I was like, oh, okay. So that was like the beginning of wanting to study these genres on the academic side, but also wanting to have a say in mass media so that a different audience, I could reach a different audience. Oh, and I just want to say that from that Puerto Rico-based project, that led me to realize how important Puerto Ricans, New York Puerto Ricans were to the development of hip hop culture to begin with. So then I contacted Juan Flores to see if I could be his student. And that's how I then moved to New York to study with Juan. So that's how it started.
Great. That's interesting that you mentioned like the circuitous nature of hip hop with regards to New York Puerto Ricans influencing the island, and then you have a feedback loop as well because then you have the styles of the island influencing what's going on in New York. And I can't help but draw parallels to like the development of salsa music as well, because I think that a lot of that it would get recorded in studios in New York City, it would get popularized on the radio in Puerto Rico, and then you would have artists that would do tours and things like that. So it's definitely that, you know, having part of that documentation is really important. At this point in your academic and scholarly career, were you already collecting documentation of hip hop movements?
Everything like from the beginning in Puerto Rico that I started like reaching out to the tiny record labels like Prime Entertainment that had Vico C, Francesca, Lisa M, they were all under that label. So I would like go to them and just like, okay, give me everything you have. So they would give me recordings, they would give me like promotional materials, photos. The Calle Serra in Santurce was like a really important place where a lot of music distributors went. Like in 1993, when the police went to raid the stores to get rid of underground tapes and CDs, that's where they went, among other places. So my sister and I would go up and down Calle Serra every so often saying, you know, I'm doing this stuff, I'm writing for Claridad, I'm writing for the San Juan Star, give me everything you can give me. So all of that stuff, I am very happy to say, is now at the Centro Archives. So from that early period, like 1992 to maybe 1995, was when I collected a lot of things because I was in Puerto Rico. But then everything that I came across later on, like I would just keep knowing that it would serve my book at one point. And then finally, when the book came out, I was like, well, what am I going to do with all this stuff? Like 7 books can come out of this. And hopefully somebody else or a few somebody else's will get interested. So I knew that, yeah, that just had to be available to the public, and the Centro Archives were the obvious choice for me because I've had a long-standing relationship from when I was a student. And I would just go to the archives and to the library. So yes, I'm very happy that all of that stuff is now at Centro.
And it's great that you mentioned that because we just posted in the chat the page for your collection. So Lindsay, do you want to say a little bit about Reca's collection here at Centro?
Sure. So I mean, it really has the distinction of being the hip hop collection at Centro, and it has like, it doesn't just have Raquel's articles, it has, you know, full issues of Claridad in the House and Stress, like, which gives you so much more of the culture beyond like what you're writing. It puts it in context, I think, and like what's happening in the moment. There's a small digital collection available through our digital collections, but I'd say really to experience Raquel's collection, it's coming to Centro and working with the material. And we're working on getting more and more of it digitized because there's such a robust AV component, but there's tons of CDs and cassettes and videotapes, some of which we've digitized already. So I think there's just so much more that we can offer. I can't wait to get more and more of it digitized and available. But it's definitely just an incredibly rich collection that you really have to come to Centro to fully experience and immerse yourself in.
And it's divided into 7 distinct series. So it essentially, it's like your collection has 7 chapters to it. and it goes from biographical and personal information about Raquel the scholar, and it has a very extensive subject file. You were a writer, and you collected clippings from all sorts of things. So there's all sorts of interesting subject files in there as well. Your personal writings, things that were published, and drafts, and things like that. And then there's just an artist file as well, so about all these different musical artists, and hip hop artists. Um, Published publications is another big part of it. Like Lindsay was saying, like we have entire magazines.
And I do want to say we did digitize a bunch of it. Any of the Claridad and In the House and Stress articles that Raquel wrote, we've digitized, and they're available through the Dropbox link that we're gonna ask Kamacha to throw in. Also, a bunch of it's on Raquel's personal website, which has been great. And hopefully in the next couple months, it'll also be in our digital collections as well. So just trying to get as much of that out there and available beyond having to come here to Centro.
Yeah, we do ask that everybody keep an eye on the chat, because as we're talking, there will be links dropped to, in addition to stuff that's in our digital repository, there will also be links to Dropboxes where you have access to articles and other important documents related to what we're talking about today. In addition, another series is the series of photographs, so photographic documentation. And then the audio visuals, so tons of CDs and audio cassettes as well. Music and interviews, and all sorts of really great things. And there's the link to the Dropbox that I think it's a really, really great resource. So definitely bookmark that link if you're at all remotely interested in continuing to learn more about what we're talking about today. Raquel, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the outlets you worked with, and some of the artists and topics that you might have focused on in your research?
Yes. I mentioned Claridad, who gave me my first chance at an article. And after that, Claridad made a space for a collective that called ourselves Las Garabatas al Cruce. And we did 2 issues, one dedicated to rap and reggae in Puerto Rico, and another one to graffiti. And then we did another issue later on. So Claridad was a big one. And all throughout my career, like I just kept publishing in Claridad. That was my go-to. The San Juan Star was another space that I mean, really because of personal connections, because this amazing journalist, Felix Jimenez, was there at the San Juan Star. That's the reason why anybody paid me attention, because he was there. So I'm very grateful to him. And both in Claridad and in the San Juan Star, it wasn't about interviewing the big like commercial artists. I mean, even though at this time, probably the most commercial was Vico C. But I got to interview people like the Guanábanas Podría, who were, part of that, I don't know how to call it, moral panic that happened in 1993 when, underground artists are going to ruin our society. And, the Guanábanas Podría had some of the lyrics that were most often quoted. So I got to interview them. And I got to write about people like DJ Adam, DJ K. Kemet, just like people who were central to what was happening then. And also a little bit later in the House magazine, which was the first rap and reggae and underground publication in Puerto Rico, I started writing for them. And at the same time, I was writing for Stress magazine that was based in New York City. And I can't say enough good things about Stress. It was a hip hop, not just rap, but like hip hop culture magazine, and it was very political too. So I got to write about the struggle against the U.S. Navy in Vieques, about police brutality, and it was like the core group was Latinos that were part of hip hop culture. So it had a really, yes, please look up those magazines, because the way that hip hop is described and covered is very imbued in that New York City centric African Americans and Puerto Ricans and West Indians and other Latinos have been doing this, and it was really about highlighting the connections between all these artists and all these groups that were at the center of this. Among the artists that I enjoyed the most talking to is probably two dancers, B-Girl Rockefeller. I co-wrote an article with her for In the House magazine, and it was just such a joy to collaborate with her. And she's going to be part of the Centro event that's happening in early December. So I'm very glad that she is getting highlighted. And the other dancer was Diana Figueroa, who was a Brooklyn up rock dancer from the 70s, who nobody could track down. And I was able to track down, and talking for hours with Diana, it was amazing. My other favorite artist to interview was Hurricane G, who was a really solid MC, Gloria Rodriguez, who sadly passed away recently. And I interviewed her for Stress, and I published that interview in Spanish in the House magazine. So that's something that I did a lot also. I would interview somebody in Spanish and do a version in English for Stress, or the other way around, because these were two different audiences that did not overlap. And since I could write in both, then I made sure to do that. I concentrated more on interviewing artists that were not commercial. I interviewed very few commercial artists. The one artist that I had the absolute joy to interview for Vibe magazine was Tego Calderon, and the full interview is part of the Centro Archives. And that interview was done at La Casita de Chema, the old Casita de Chema. So you can hear the music in the background. You can hear kids and adults coming in and out of the casita where we were doing the interview. And also that interview appears in a Centro journal issue. So this was when Tego was just coming out. And again, because there was a visionary music editor at Vibe magazine, Elizabeth Mendez Berry, who recognized how important Tego was, then she reached out to me and she was like, okay, I convinced the folks at Vibe to do this article. Will you do it? So yeah, I just want to highlight that I was part of this larger movement of artists, of media makers that were all connected to each other and were like conspiring to shape a little bit what was happening, and shape it in terms of not leaving Puerto Ricans and Latinos out of the hip hop narrative, but also integrating politics into the way hip hop culture was covered, and also highlighting artists beyond the commercial rap artists. So highlighting graffiti artists and DJs and dancers. So I am so glad that there was that little network of people conspiring together.
Okay, Tego is like notorious for not giving interviews to anyone. So how did you swing interviewing him? And two, do you remember what the reception was to that interview when you did it? Like how was it for the magazine? If you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think back then, because Tego was just starting out, it wasn't Raquel Rivera reaching out to him. It was Vibe magazine reaching out to him. And this was when he was first coming out. This was before Gasolina, when many of us were hoping that, Tego would be the artist, and then he got overshadowed by other artists. I'm revealing my biases here. Yes. So the fact that it was Vibe, but also the fact that of where I proposed to interview him at La Casita de Chema, which is this cultural institution in New York City. The best plena and bomba musicians are gathered there, from the elders to the youngest. So I think he also got a kick out of that. Like, oh, okay, this is Vibe, but this is also La Casita de Chema, like what's going on? And in terms of the reception, I think Vibe audiences were like, oh, what's this new thing that's coming out? But I think it was among our Puerto Rican community that we were like, oh, okay, this is an artist that's doing things differently at the lyrical level, at the musical level. And there was a lot of excitement because of his bridging of traditional Puerto Rican music and reggaeton and hip hop. Yeah, also because at that time there was a lot of tension between hip hop and reggaeton. And Tego, I mean, he started out as a hip hop artist and then he kind of crossed over into reggaeton, but with all that skill that he had. So it was a time where, lovers of hip hop, of plena, of bomba, of reggaeton could agree that there was this amazing musical force that was being recognized.
Rebecca, you said something that piqued my interest just now. You said that there was tension between the rappers here in the city and the artists on Puerto Rico. You say a little bit more about that? What was that about?
Well, it wasn't so much New York versus Puerto Rico, but it was more people who loved reggaeton versus people who loved hip hop, both in Puerto Rico and in New York.
I see.
I have to admit that my first love is hip hop.
Okay.
So and this is me that I was collecting all this stuff, but aesthetically, I was like, oh my God, like hip hop artists. And my bias for hip hop was not based on reggaeton music sucks, but it was more like, like if they could just up their, their production, if they could just like develop those skills more. Not to say that there were not skilled people, but as a whole, I think that bias that I felt for hip hop, a lot of people who loved hip hop were like, no, reggaeton sucks. They do the same crap all the time. And, the lyrics are not really interesting or intricate. So that's what I refer to. Like, for example, there was No Mel Syndicate in Puerto Rico, and it was the No Melaza Syndicate. And Melaza was like the way that underground was called also, or, pre-reggaeton. And it was a group of really skilled hip hop artists that they were like, no Melaza here. And we dedicate ourselves to hip hop also. And something similar was happening in New York as well, that people that were very invested in hip hop were just like, what is this reggaeton wishy-washiness? Or even, before it was called reggaeton.
Right.
So I think we have time for like one last question before we get into the Q&A. But I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit on your research methodology when covering Puerto Ricans in hip hop. Like, as a researcher, what resources did you rely on? Kind of what was your avenue and methodology for conducting this research, especially with this emerging area of music?
I am so grateful to all of you at Centro that you digitize the book release party in 2003. It's been 20 years since that book release party. And I want to bring that up because it's a testament to, I guess, my methodology, but really what I learned from Juan Flores and what I picked up from everybody that was around me. That book was like a community effort and a community celebration. So that book release party, more than 400 people were at the Julia de Burgos Cultural Center in 106 and Lexington Avenue. It was first a panel discussion, and then it turned into a party. There was hip hop, there was bomba, there were people spilling out onto the street. And it was a testament, not so much to this book because it's an academic book. I tried to make it as readable as possible, but it was the excitement of a community celebrating that Puerto Ricans were being seen and recognized. And there's, I don't know if we have time, Lindsay, to play that little second clip of because it's a beautiful interaction in the panel. This little part, there's Tony Tone from the Cold Crush Brothers, one of the pioneering groups from the 1980s, and Charlie Chase is part of the conversation also. They're both part of the Cold Crush, and Juan Flores is sitting right next to them. And Tony Tone is saying, like, it was just this beautiful interaction of brotherhood, like an African American DJ and MC and a Puerto Rican DJ in dialogue and just professing like how much their partnership meant to them. So if you can play that little clip of Tony Tone.
Yeah,
absolutely. Let's
we'll
do it.
take care of that right now. Thank you for the setup.
Okay, Tony Tone would like to say one thing. Let's give Tony Tone for the next Bear with me. I get very, very energized at things like this, and I usually don't talk because the emotion level is crazy. This brother right here, I mean, people should look at him for a lot more than what they look at him for. Because before Big Pun and a whole lot of people, he stepped in the door of hip hop. And a very strong force. He went through a whole lot of stuff. DJing with asthma attacks and all that. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's sometimes he literally used to have to leave the party because he couldn't breathe. And he went through a whole lot of stuff to get it where it's at. And for people to just say, oh, that's Charlie Chase, I think they should say a whole lot more than that. Because me being a Black brother, I got with him. And I don't look at him as a Puerto Rican, I look at him as my brother. And doors that I was able to walk through that he wasn't able to walk through, he was able to walk through there with me. And I wasn't ashamed to take him in there with me.
Thank you for playing that. That little clip is an example of the spirit of that event. It wasn't about saying, oh, Puerto Ricans started this. It was about highlighting we started this together. And the presence of people like Tony Tone, who were there from the 70s, from the 80s. It was really beautiful. And I want to highlight that Juan Flores is on the panel. Miriam, his wife and amazing scholar, she stood up for a second in the audience. Right next to Juan is Marinieves Alba, who is a really, well, the person who helped me pull off that book release party, or really she pulled it off. And she is also a hip hop educator, community organizer. She was part of the panel. And so many other amazing artists were there. In the background, that graffiti piece you see is by Bio of Tat's Crew. And there was artwork of Tat's Crew all over the place in the gallery space. So I really want to encourage people to watch just what each of these artists and scholars say about Puerto Ricans in hip hop, because we have so much room to cover, and so much more work to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that because I like watched the whole thing, and it's incredible just to see the mix of both people who are, you know, MCs and involved, and like the musicians, and they're there, but there's also the scholarly piece. I think it's just such a beautiful melding of all of those different areas. I'd also like to give a little shout out to Juan Flores and the Juan Flores Papers, which we're imminently going to be releasing. We are the home also of the Juan Flores Papers, and there's substantial research on of the work that he did on hip hop as well. And actually, his wife Miriam, her papers are actually at the Schomburg Center, and they're going to be arranged and described in the next coming years. So we're really excited to have those collections in dialogue, but also to add just another element to, you know, another facet to our hip hop collection to complement yours would be the Juan Flores Papers. I don't want to run out of time for as much as I want to keep talking with you, Raquel. I want to open it up to questions so that we have an opportunity. So you can put questions in the Q&A, and let's see. Somebody asked where we can see the whole clip. In the Dropbox link that we shared, there's the entire book release party, so you can see the full conversation that they have.
Yeah, so if you scroll back up in the chat, there'll be a Dropbox link, and it'll have the video that we were from the book release party. There's also a list of I've put a PDF in there of material in the Centro Library relating to hip hop, and including articles that Raquel has written. And also in the chat, if you are so moved by what you have seen today that you want to get your hip hop and Puerto Rican research started, you can come and make an appointment to view Raquel's papers and get hands-on with all of that work that she did. As she mentioned today, all of the walking around, talking to people, rescuing documentation, all of that is documented in her papers, and you can see that in addition to her published works and other subject files in there. So there's a wealth of research, and the thing is, it's like if you want, and Raquel, you leave a big imprint in this topic. If you want to research Puerto Ricans in hip hop, you have to work with Raquel's papers. I mean, it's this ideal jumping off point, because she had done so much of the work, and you also receive like a historical context for the development of hip hop culture through the Puerto Rican lens. So yeah, someone said thank you for your work, Raquel. Like, yeah, we are all indebted to the work that you did, and just your scholarship. Is there anything that you're working on now, or anything that you'd like to share, or anything you'd like to shout out in our closing minutes here?
Yes, first I want to say that without Juan Flores, my work would not be, period. So I'm very excited to know that the Juan Flores papers are coming out. Yeah, he was so generous and such a visionary in his scholarship. So I just want to, acknowledge him. And wait, I spaced that one. Oh, yes, upcoming. My research has veered onto the land of reproductive justice. I work with a reproductive justice organization in Albuquerque, and that's what I'm focused on. But as I don't know if segue or what to call it, I have written a novel that has received recognition and a prize, and I hope to figure out where and how to publish it soon enough. And it's called The Song Cipher, and it's about a group of young people in the 90s who are into hip hop and become obsessed with bomba music from Puerto Rico and Dominican palos. And it's like them building their little community and utopia, heavily based on music. So, who knows when that book will come out, but I get a kick out of the fact that now, like, my academic work in hip hop and on bomba and on palos has found its way into fiction. So yes, I will let you know once that is out.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. And it's a pretty hefty one. So this is definitely not gonna, we don't have enough time to get to fully to the bottom of this, but Raquel, let's see if you can give it a shot. Why is it that we as Puerto Ricans have to constantly reaffirm our history/origin story in hip hop? It should be clear that we were at the foundation, but outside of New York, it's rarely recognized. Even in New York, at times, it is contested. Why is that? Why the constant reaffirmation, Raquel?
If that statement is not made among the people who lived the beginning of hip hop, that statement makes no sense. Unless you were part of that joint creation, and not only joint creation, joint living and joint sharing everything, the joys and the pains of living in the same neighborhood. I mean, imagine if you are African American and you live in Detroit and you have no context for this, and suddenly somebody says, oh yeah, Puerto Ricans were an integral part of hip hop culture. It makes no sense. And I think, I mean, it also has to do with all these tensions and even our own anti-Black, meaning anti-Puerto Rican Blackness and anti-African Americanness that our community has held and holds. So it's really complicated. It's not, I don't think it's fair either for us to say, oh, those people don't know the truth. Well, that truth is based on the fact that African Americans have been denied their contributions to many different genres and cultural forms. And oh, here come Puerto Ricans, and they want to get in on the action too and steal it from us. Like it's complicated, and it can be viewed from different, and it should be viewed from different angles. But I really appreciate the way that person framed the question, because it's in New York among people who have an experience with those cultural products and practices, and the African Americans who lived it, for them, and the Jamaicans and Barbadians, for them it's so easy. Oh, of course Puerto Ricans were part of it, but it's because either they lived it or they are part of this knowledge passing forward from their elders, that they're like, oh yeah, my mom and my tia who's African American and my mom who's Puerto Rican were dancing together, or whatever it was. There has to be like a frame of reference where it makes sense to people. And in the meantime, we have to be really patient and just keep chipping away at this. And I know that it's really frustrating because it's the same the same stereotypes or the same myths that keep being circulated. And that book came out in 20 years ago, and artists have been saying this for 20 years earlier, but it's like we have to keep repeating it and repeating it.
Well, I think Raquel, there's so much left to talk about, and we even got a couple of additional questions. But we will make sure those questions get to Raquel, and we can answer them offline. Raquel, I want to thank you. You should look in the chat if you got the moment. Everybody's so effusive with their thanks for everything that you've done, for the scholarship, for Centro, and for hip hop culture. We definitely want to thank you for your work. We on a daily basis are reminded through your collection about the impact that you've had on our community. And we frequently recommend your collection to people, even if they're not interested specifically in hip hop. I think it's a great for the greater cultural appreciation of what it means to be a Puerto Rican. And to that end, please, if anything that we said today resonated with you and you want to see get hands-on with records papers, please do make an appointment. We're here Monday through Friday from 10 to 5 here in East Harlem on 119th Street and 3rd Avenue. And this library lunch hour, we have some more coming up. So there's going to be links so you can sign up for future library lunch hours about a variety of different topics coming up. So thank you so much. If you got in late, we do make these available on our YouTube channel as well later on. So in a couple of weeks' time, you'll be able to watch it on YouTube. So thank you, everyone. Raquel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Raquel.
Thank you to everyone who attended. I think this was a pretty well attended library lunch hour. So thank you, thank you everyone who asked questions. Enjoy your holiday and have a good day. Bye, everybody. Till next time.
Thank you all.